She walked up to me at my husband's funeral, placed a baby in my arms, and said 5 words that destroyed everything I thought I knew. "He's yours now. I'm done." And she handed me an envelope and walked away. And what I found inside that envelope, it changed my entire life, but not in the way you're thinking, not even close. Let me take you back to the beginning, because if you're going to understand what happened that day and everything that came after, you need to know the whole story. You need to know who I was, who my husband was, and how a single envelope could turn my entire world upside down. My name is Catherine. I'm 43 years old, and 3 months ago, I buried my husband of 18 years. Richard and I met when I was 22, fresh out of college, full of dreams, ready to conquer the world. I was working at a marketing firm in Boston. Entry level, nothing special, but it was a start. Richard was a client. He owned a small construction company that was trying to expand. He came in for a meeting about branding, and I was assigned to take notes. He was 12 years older than me, confident, successful. He had this way of looking at you, like you were the only person in the room, like everything you said mattered, like you were special. I fell hard and I fell fast. We dated for 6 months before he proposed. My mother said it was too quick. My friends said I barely knew him. But I was young and in love, and absolutely certain that Richard was the one, the man I would spend the rest of my life with. We got married on a sunny day in June. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. Richard didn't want anything flashy. He said he didn't believe in wasting money on one day when we had a whole lifetime ahead of us. I thought that was practical and romantic at the same time. The early years were good. Really good. Richard's company grew. We bought a nice house in the suburbs. We talked about having children, but it never happened. I had some health issues that made pregnancy difficult, and after a few rounds of treatments that didn't work, we decided to stop trying. Richard said he was okay with it. He said I was enough. He said we didn't need children to be a family. I believed him. Looking back now, I see the signs I missed. The late nights at work that became more and more frequent, the business trips that stretched from 2 days to a week, the phone calls he would take in another room, the credit card statements I wasn't allowed to see. But at the time, I trusted him completely. I had no reason not to. He was my husband. He loved me. That's what I told myself every time a small doubt crept into my mind. He loves me. Everything is fine. Then, 8 months ago, Richard had a heart attack. It happened at work. One of his employees called me. By the time I got to the hospital, Richard was in surgery. The doctors said it was serious. Very serious. They weren't sure if he would make it. He did make it. Barely. But the damage, too. His heart was severe. He was in the hospital for 3 weeks, then home on bed rest for another 2 months. He couldn't work. He couldn't do much of anything. He just lay in bed, watching television, growing weaker and more bitter by the day. I took care of him. That's what wives do, right? I brought him his meals. I gave him his medications. I helped him to the bathroom when he was too weak to walk on his own. I put my entire life on hold to be his nurse, his caretaker, his everything, and not once, not a single time did he say, "Thank you." I told myself it was the illness, the frustration, the fear. Richard wasn't an ungrateful man. He was just going through a hard time. When he got better, things would go back to normal. We would be happy again. He didn't get better. 3 months after his heart attack, Richard had another one. This time, there was no surgery that could save him. He died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. I wasn't even there. I was at the grocery store, buying ingredients for the special dinner I was planning to make him that night. The last thing I said to my husband was, "I'll be back in an hour." And the last thing he said to me was, "Don't forget the butter." 18 years of marriage, and those were our final words. The funeral was held 5 days later. I was numb through most of it. The planning, the arrangements, the endless decisions about caskets and flowers and music. I moved through it all like a robot, doing what needed to be done without really feeling anything. Richard had a lot of friends, business associates, employees, people from the community. The church was packed. Everyone wanted to pay their respects to Richard Thompson, beloved husband, successful businessman, pillar of the community. I stood at the front, accepting condolences, shaking hands, nodding at people I barely recognized. It was exhausting, but I kept a smile on my face, because that's what was expected. That's what a grieving widow does. And then she walked in. I noticed her immediately. She was young, maybe late 20s, beautiful in that effortless way that some women are. Long dark hair, perfect skin, expensive clothes. She didn't belong there. I knew everyone who was supposed to be at the funeral, and she was definitely not on the list. She stood in the back of the church during the service, didn't speak to anyone, didn't come up to the casket, just stood there watching. I tried to focus on the minister's words, on the hymns, on the people crying around me, but I kept glancing back at her. Who was she? Why was she here? After the service, everyone gathered in the reception hall for food and memories. I was standing near the refreshment table, trying to eat a sandwich I had no appetite for when she approached me. She was carrying something, a bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. It took me a moment to realize it was a baby, a tiny infant, probably no more than a few months old. "Catherine?" she said. "Yes?" My voice was cautious. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. "My name is Melissa." She shifted the baby in her arms. I was Richard's. I was with Richard. For the past 4 years. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the room spin. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. 4 years. My husband had been having an affair for 4 years, and I had no idea. "I'm sorry to do this here," Melissa continued. Her voice was cold, matter-of-fact, like she was discussing the weather. "But I don't have a choice. I can't do this anymore." She held out the baby, pushed him toward me. "His name is Michael. He's Richard's son. He's 8 weeks old." She paused. "And he's yours now. I'm done." I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I just stared at her, then at the baby, then back at her. "What are you talking about?" I finally managed to say. "I can't. You can't just—" "Richard promised me he would leave you." Her eyes were hard. "He said we would be a family. He said he would take care of everything. But now he's dead, and I'm stuck with a baby I never wanted, and I have nothing. No money, no support, nothing." She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope, white, plain, with my name written on the front. In handwriting I recognized immediately. Richard's handwriting. "He told me to give you this if anything happened to him." She thrust the envelope into my hands. "Everything you need to know is in there. The rest is your problem now." And then she walked away. Just like that. She placed her baby in the arms of a complete stranger and walked out of the church without looking back. I stood there, holding an infant I had never seen before, clutching an envelope from my dead husband, while the entire reception hall stared at me in shocked silence. That was the moment my life fell apart, and the moment it started to come back together. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that I was holding a baby, and everything I thought I knew about my marriage was a lie. I don't remember much about the next few hours. People helped me, I know that. Richard's sister took the baby for a moment while I sat down. Someone brought me water. Someone else called my mother. There was a lot of whispering, a lot of shocked faces, a lot of people who didn't know what to say. I didn't open the envelope. Not there, not with everyone watching. I shoved it into my purse and tried to focus on getting through the rest of the day. The reception ended eventually. People left, offering awkward condolences that now felt hollow and strange. Richard's sister Margaret drove me home. The baby was in a car seat that someone had found somewhere. I didn't even know whose it was. "What are you going to do?" Margaret asked as we pulled into my driveway. "I don't know." It was the most honest answer I could give. "You don't have to keep him, you know." Her voice was careful, cautious. "There are options. Adoption, foster care." "I know." But even as I said it, I looked at the baby sleeping peacefully in the back seat. Michael. That's what she had called him. Michael, Richard's son. My husband had a son, a child he had made with another woman, a child he had kept secret from me for how long? The baby was 8 weeks old. Melissa had said the affair lasted 4 years. So Richard knew about this baby. He had known for months, and he never said a word. That night, after Margaret left, after I had fed the baby with formula that a neighbor had rushed to buy for me, after I had put him down in a makeshift bed made of pillows and blankets on my bedroom floor, I finally opened the envelope. My hands were shaking as I pulled out the contents. There were several pages, all written in Richard's neat handwriting, and there were other documents, too. Legal documents, bank statements, things I didn't immediately understand. I started with the letter. "Dear Catherine," it began, "if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And if Melissa has done what I asked her to do, then you now know the truth. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have told you years ago. I should have been honest with you. But I was a coward, and I took the easy way out. And now you're paying the price for my mistakes. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need you to understand some things before you decide what to do next. Melissa and I met at a conference in Chicago 4 years ago. It was wrong from the start, and I knew it was wrong, but I did it anyway. I told myself it didn't mean anything, that it was just physical, that it wouldn't affect my marriage to you. But I was lying to myself. It meant something, and it affected everything. When Melissa told me she was pregnant, I panicked. I wanted her to end the pregnancy, but she refused. She said she wanted to keep the baby. She said she wanted us to be a family. And for a while, I considered it. I considered leaving you, starting over with her, but I couldn't do it. Not because I loved you more than her. That's not the reason. The real reason is much worse than that. And you deserve to know the truth. Catherine, I never loved Melissa. I used her. I used her because I was bored, because I was selfish, because I could. And when she got pregnant, I realized that I had created a mess I couldn't clean up. But here's the thing you need to understand. I never loved you either. Not really. Not the way a husband should love his wife. I married you because you were suitable. You were pretty enough, smart enough, pleasant enough. You came from a good family. You would be a good wife for a man like me. That's all it was. Suitability, convenience, a business arrangement dressed up as romance. I know how cruel this sounds. I know you're probably crying right now, or angry, or both. But you deserve the truth, even if it hurts. You spent 18 years married to a man who never truly loved you, and I'm sorry for that. More sorry than you'll ever know. I had to stop reading. The tears were blurring my vision. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the paper. Every word was a knife in my heart. Every sentence destroyed another piece of what I thought my life had been. He never loved me. 18 years, and he never loved me. I thought about all the times I'd felt lucky. Lucky to have such a successful husband. Lucky to have such a nice life. Lucky to be Catherine Thompson, wife of Richard Thompson. What a joke. What a pathetic, stupid joke. But I forced myself to keep reading. There was more, and I needed to know all of it. Now I need to tell you about the money, the letter continued. When we got married, I had my business, which was worth quite a bit even then. Over the years, it grew considerably. You never asked many questions about our finances, which I appreciated. It made things easier. What you don't know is that I've been moving money around for years, creating accounts you didn't know about, setting up trusts and investments that weren't in your name. I told myself I was protecting our assets, but really I was preparing for the possibility that someday I might leave, that someday I might need resources that you couldn't touch. When Melissa got pregnant, I accelerated this process. I set up a trust for the baby. I put Melissa on several accounts. I made sure that if I died, she and the child would be taken care of. But then something happened that I didn't expect. Melissa changed. The pregnancy was difficult, and after the baby was born, she fell into a depression. She told me she didn't want the child. She said she had made a mistake. She said she wanted out. I offered her money, a lot of money. I told her I would give her enough to start over somewhere else if she would just walk away and leave the baby with me. She agreed. The money was transferred to her 3 weeks before I died. Catherine, Melissa has been paid very well. When she handed you the baby and said she had nothing, she was lying. She has $3 million in an account in her name, more than enough to disappear and never look back. The reason she gave you the baby is because that was part of our agreement. If I died before I could figure out what to do with Michael, she would bring him to you. Not because she cared about him finding a good home, but because I wrote it into the contract. She had to deliver the baby to you, or she would forfeit the money. So now you have a choice to make. You can reject Michael, put him up for adoption, let him become a ward of the state. No one would blame you. He's not your child. He's the product of your husband's affair. You have every right to walk away. Or, the letter continued, but I'll pause here for a moment, because I need you to understand what I was feeling. I was devastated, destroyed. Everything I believed about my life had been ripped away. My husband never loved me. He used me as a prop, a decoration, a convenient wife to make his life easier. And when he got bored, he found someone younger and more exciting. But at the same time, there was a baby sleeping on my bedroom floor. A baby who hadn't asked to be born into this mess. A baby who had already been abandoned by his mother and would never know his father. An innocent child who had no one in the world. I looked at Michael. He was sleeping peacefully, his tiny chest rising and falling. He had Richard's nose. I could see it already, and something else. Something around the eyes that looked almost like me? No, that was impossible. I was imagining things. I was exhausted and emotional and looking for connections that didn't exist. I went back to the letter. Or, Richard's words continued, you can keep him. Raise him as your own. Give him the life he deserves. I know this is asking a lot. maybe too much. But Michael is innocent in all of this. He didn't choose his parents. He didn't choose to be born. He's just a baby, and he needs someone to love him. If you decide to keep him, everything you need is in this envelope. I've set up a trust in his name, not the one I originally created, which Melissa tried to claim but couldn't access because of legal protections I put in place. A separate trust, one that's specifically for his care and education. There's enough money there to give him a good life, a very good life. There's also a document giving you full legal guardianship. Melissa signed away her parental rights as part of our agreement. She can't come back and claim him. She can't change her mind. He's yours, if you want him. And finally, there's one more thing. Something I've kept secret from everyone. Something that will change everything you think you know about Michael, about Melissa, about me. But I'm not going to write it here. Some truths are too important for letters. If you want to know the whole truth, you'll find it in the safety deposit box at First National Bank. The key is taped to the back of this envelope. Box 447. Go there, Catherine, see what's inside, and then decide what to do with the rest of your life. I put down the letter. My mind was racing. What could possibly be in that safety deposit box? What truth could be more shocking than what I had already learned? I felt behind the envelope. Sure enough, there was a small key taped there, cold and metallic against my fingers. I looked at the clock. It was nearly midnight. The bank wouldn't be open for another 9 hours. 9 hours of waiting. 9 hours of wondering. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat in a chair next to Michael's makeshift bed, watching him breathe, thinking about everything Richard had written, about love and lies and money and secrets, about a baby who had no one, about a wife who had wasted 18 years on a man who never cared. And I thought about that safety deposit box. What was in there? What could Richard possibly have been hiding that was even bigger than an affair and a secret child? By the time the sun came up, I had made a decision. Not about Michael. Not yet. But about the box. I had to know. Whatever was in there, whatever truth Richard had kept from me, I had to see it for myself. I called Margaret and asked her to watch Michael for a few hours. She agreed, though I could hear the concern in her voice. She wanted to know if I was okay. I told her I was fine. It was a lie, but it was a necessary one. At 9 o'clock sharp, I walked into First National Bank. The bank was quiet that morning, almost too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you aware of every sound. The click of my heels on the marble floor, the soft hum of the air conditioning, the distant murmur of tellers speaking to customers in hushed, professional tones. I stood just inside the entrance for a moment, trying to collect myself. My hands were shaking. I could feel my heart beating in my chest, faster than normal, harder than normal. Whatever was in that safety deposit box had the power to change everything. Richard had said so in his letter. And despite all his lies, despite all his deceptions, I believed him about this. I approached the customer service desk. A woman sat behind it, middle-aged, with kind eyes and a professional smile. Her nameplate said Barbara. She looked up as I approached. "Good morning. How can I help you today?" My voice came out steadier than I expected. "I need to access a safety deposit box. Box 447. "Of course. Do you have your key and identification?" I fumbled in my purse, my fingers clumsy with nerves. The key was still there, taped to the back of the envelope where Richard had left it. I peeled it off and placed it on the counter, along with my driver's license. Barbara examined both carefully. She typed something into her computer, frowned slightly, then typed something else. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, her voice softening, "I see here that this box was registered to your husband. I'm very sorry for your loss. Thank you." The words came automatically. I had said them so many times in the past week that they had lost all meaning. "According to our records, you were listed as the secondary holder, so you have full access." She stood up. "If you'll follow me?" She led me through a heavy door that required her key card and a code. Beyond it was a long hallway, walls lined with metal boxes of various sizes. Some were small, barely bigger than a paperback book. Others were large enough to hold stacks of documents or valuables. The lighting was dim, the air cool and slightly stale. It felt like walking into a vault, which, I supposed, it was. Box 407 was on the lower left side of the hallway, about halfway down. It was medium-sized, maybe the dimensions of a shoebox. Barbara knelt down and inserted her master key into one of the two locks. She gestured for me to insert mine into the other. The locks turned simultaneously. There was a soft click, and the box slid out smoothly. Barbara handed it to me. It was heavier than I expected. "There's a private room just there," she said, pointing to a door at the end of the hallway. "Take as long as you need. When you're finished, just press the button on the wall and I'll come assist you." "Thank you." I carried the box into the private room. It was small, just a table and a chair, with blank walls and a single overhead light. I closed the door behind me and sat down. The box sat on the table in front of me. Gray metal, anonymous, holding secrets I wasn't sure I wanted to know. I thought about not opening it. For a long moment, I seriously considered just putting it back, leaving the bank, going home to Michael, and pretending this box didn't exist. I had already learned so much. Too much. Did I really need to know more? But even as I thought it, I knew I would open it. The need to know was too strong. The questions were too loud. Whatever was in here, I had to see it. I took a deep breath, and I opened the box. The first thing I saw was a stack of photographs. I lifted them out carefully, as if they might bite. The first photograph showed Richard and Melissa together. They were at some kind of resort. Palm trees visible in the background, blue sky above. Richard was wearing a casual shirt I didn't recognize. Melissa was in a sundress, leaning against him, smiling at the camera. They looked happy. They looked like a couple. The date stamp in the corner said the photo was taken about 3 years ago. 3 years. While I was at home, cooking his dinners, washing his clothes, sleeping in his bed, while I thought we had a good marriage, while I believed in us. I set the photograph aside, my jaw tight. The second photograph was of Melissa alone. She was very pregnant in this one, standing sideways to show off her belly, one hand resting on it in that universal pose of expectant mothers. She was wearing a loose white dress, and she was looking at the camera with an expression I couldn't quite read. Pride, satisfaction, something else? Richard wasn't in this picture, but someone had taken it. Someone had been there with her, documenting the pregnancy, documenting the growth of the child that would become Michael. The third photograph was of the baby himself. Newborn wrapped in a hospital blanket, eyes closed, tiny fists curled near his face. He looked so small, so fragile, so completely dependent on the adults around him. I stared at this photograph for a long time. This was my son. The child sleeping on my bedroom floor right now. The child I had been handed at my husband's funeral by a woman I didn't know. In the photograph, he looked like any other baby. But now that I was really looking, now that I was really studying his features, I could see hints of Richard in the shape of his nose, the set of his jaw. He had his father's face. The fourth photograph made me stop breathing. It wasn't a photograph of people. It was a photograph of a document, medical paperwork, photographed so that every word was legible. I had to squint to read it, had to hold it close to my face in the dim light of the private room. It was a genetic testing report, DNA analysis, the kind of test that laboratories do to determine parentage. There were columns of numbers and percentages that meant nothing to me. Scientific terminology I didn't understand. But at the bottom, in bold letters that I understood perfectly, maternal DNA match, 97% probability. Maternal DNA match. The words swam before my eyes. Whose maternal DNA? Matched to whom? What did this mean? I set the photograph down and dug deeper into the box. There were more documents, legal papers, bank statements, and at the very bottom, a small envelope with a single word written on the front in Richard's handwriting. Truth. My hands were trembling so badly that I had trouble opening it. I tore the envelope, not caring about neatness, just needing to get to what was inside. Another letter from Richard. This one was shorter than the first, only 2 pages. But as I read it, I realized that those 2 pages would change everything. Catherine, it began, if you're reading this, then you've seen the DNA report, and I know you're confused. You're probably scared. You're probably wondering if you've lost your mind. You haven't. What you're seeing is real, and I need to explain it to you, even though I know no explanation will be enough, even though I know you're going to hate me even more than you already do. Here's the truth, the whole truth, the thing I should have told you years ago, but was too cowardly to say. Do you remember when we were trying to have a baby, all those years ago, in the early years of our marriage? You wanted a child so badly. I watched you cry every month when the test came back negative. I held you after the miscarriage. I sat with you in the doctor's office when they explained the options. One of those options was egg harvesting. The doctors said they could extract your eggs, freeze them, and use them for future treatments. It would give us more chances, more possibilities. You agreed, and the procedure was done. When the treatments didn't work, when we finally gave up, you moved on. You accepted that we wouldn't have children. You made peace with it, or at least you pretended to. But I never told you what happened to those frozen eggs. I kept them. I paid the storage fees every year, quietly without telling you. I told the facility that we might want to try again someday, and for a long time, I didn't know why I was doing it. I just couldn't let them go. They were a part of you, a possibility, a hope that I couldn't bring myself to extinguish. Then I met Melissa, and everything changed. Catherine, I need you to understand something important. Melissa was never just a mistress. She was never just an affair. From the very beginning, she was something else entirely. Something I planned. Something I arranged. I found her through an agency. A very private, very expensive, very discreet agency that specializes in certain kinds of arrangements. She was young, healthy, had no family complications, and was willing to do whatever was asked of her for the right price. I hired her to be a surrogate, not for a baby that would be mine and hers. That was never the plan. The plan was for a baby that would be mine and yours. I used your frozen eggs, Catherine. I combined them with my genetic material, and I had Melissa carry the pregnancy. She was paid extremely well for her services. She signed contracts. She agreed to all conditions. The affair was staged. A cover story. A way to explain why this young woman was suddenly in my life. People would gossip, of course. They would assume I was cheating. But that was better than the truth. The truth was too strange, too complicated, too likely to cause problems. Michael is not Melissa's biological child. He's ours, yours and mine, your eggs, my contribution, our DNA combined in a laboratory and implanted in a woman who is paid to carry him. He's our son, Catherine. Really, truly ours. I know what you're thinking. Why? Why would I do something so insane, so twisted, so incredibly, unforgivably wrong? Because I couldn't give you a baby any other way. After the treatments failed, you were devastated. I watched you grieve. I saw how you looked at other women's children, that mixture of longing and pain on your face. I knew how badly you wanted to be a mother, and I felt responsible. The doctor said stress could be a factor in fertility issues. My stress, my long hours, my health problems that were already starting back then, though I hid them from you. I wanted to fix it. I wanted to give you the one thing you wanted most in the world, but I knew you would never agree to surrogacy. You had very strong feelings about it, religious feelings, ethical feelings. You believed that if you couldn't carry a child yourself, then it wasn't meant to be. You said so many times. So I found another way, a secret way, a way that would give you a child without you ever having to know how it happened. The plan was simple, at least in theory. Melissa would carry the baby. She would give birth. She would keep the child for a few months, playing the role of the other woman. And then, after a suitable period of time, something would happen to make her give up the baby. Maybe she would claim she couldn't handle motherhood. Maybe she would say she was moving away and couldn't take the child. Some story that would be believable. I would discover that the baby was mine. I would bring him home. I would tell you that my mistress had abandoned our child, and I couldn't let him go to strangers. You would be angry, of course, hurt, but eventually, hopefully, you would accept him. You would raise him as your stepson, never knowing that he was actually your biological child. It was a terrible plan. I see that now. It was built on lies and deception and manipulation. It had 1,000 ways it could go wrong, and many of those ways did go wrong. But I convinced myself it was the right thing. I convinced myself I was doing it for you, for us, for the family we should have had, but couldn't create the normal way. I had to stop reading. My vision was blurred with tears. My hands were shaking so badly that the paper was rustling like leaves in a storm. Michael was my son, my biological son, conceived with my eggs, without my knowledge, without my consent, and carried by a stranger I had never met until she handed him to me at a funeral. The room felt like it was spinning. I put my head down on the table, pressing my forehead against the cool metal surface, trying to ground myself, trying to breathe, trying to make sense of something that made no sense at all. Richard had done this. My husband, who said he never loved me, had done this. He had created a child in secret, using my genetic material, and had planned an elaborate deception to bring that child into my life. For me. He said it was for me. But was it? Was it really for me? Or was it just another form of control? Another way to manipulate me, to shape my life according to his vision, to make decisions that should have been mine to make? I didn't know. I couldn't know. Richard was dead. The dead don't answer questions. The dead don't explain themselves. They just leave behind their messes for the living to clean up. I forced myself to keep reading. There was more. There had to be more. Everything went wrong when Melissa changed, the letter continued. She was supposed to be a professional, someone who would do a job and move on. But pregnancy changed her. Not in the way it changes some women, making them attached to the child. The opposite, actually. Melissa realized that she hated being pregnant, hated the physical changes, the discomfort, the loss of control over her own body. By the time Michael was born, she wanted nothing to do with him. She said she had made a mistake. She said she wanted out. She demanded more money. At first, I thought this was perfect. If she wanted to leave, if she wanted to give up the baby, then the plan could move forward faster than expected. I would discover Michael sooner. You would have your child sooner. But Melissa didn't want to just disappear. She wanted to cause trouble first. She found out that the baby wasn't biologically hers, that I had used someone else's eggs, and she felt betrayed. Used, which I suppose she was. She threatened to tell you everything. She said she would show up at our house and reveal the whole scheme. She said she would expose me to everyone we knew. So I paid her more, and more, and more. The $3 million I mentioned in my first letter, that was just the final payment. The amount I gave her to take the money, deliver the baby to you if I died, and disappear forever. The total amount she extracted from me over the years was much larger, almost $10 million by the end. She was blackmailing me, Catherine, and I was paying, because I couldn't let the truth come out. I couldn't let my plan fall apart. I couldn't let you find out what I had done. And then my heart failed, and suddenly I was dying, and I realized that all my careful planning, all my secrets and schemes and manipulations were about to collapse completely. I had to make a choice. Tell you the truth myself, face to face, and deal with the consequences, or write it all down and let you discover it after I was gone. I chose the coward's way out, again, just like I always did. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for so many things. But I'm not sorry for Michael. I can't be. He's real. He's beautiful. He's the one good thing to come out of all my deceptions. And he's yours, Catherine. Really, truly yours. The DNA proves it. The maternal match on that report is you. Your eggs, your genes, your son. I put the letter down on the table. I sat in silence for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. My son. The words echoed in my mind like a bell. My son. My son. My son. All those years of wanting a child, all those treatments, all those tears, all that grief when we finally gave up. And now I had a son I hadn't known about, a son conceived without my knowledge, a son born to a stranger, a son handed to me at a funeral by a woman I thought was my husband's mistress. It was too much, too strange, too overwhelming, but it was also real. The DNA report was real. The documents in this box were real. Michael, sleeping at home with Margaret, was real. My son was real. I gathered everything from the safety deposit box. All the photographs, all the documents, all the letters. I stuffed them into my purse, not caring if they got wrinkled or bent. I needed to get out of this bank. I needed to get home. I needed to see Michael. I pressed the button on the wall. Barbara appeared moments later, her professional smile faltering slightly when she saw my face. "Are you all right, Mrs. Thompson?" "Fine," I lied. "I'm fine. I'd like to close the box, please." She helped me return the empty box to its slot. She walked me back to the lobby. She wished me a good day. I don't remember walking to my car. I don't remember starting the engine. I don't remember any of the drive home. I just remember pulling into my driveway and seeing Margaret's car still parked there. I remember walking through the front door. I remember the smell of baby powder and formula, the new scents that had taken over my house in the past week. Margaret was in the living room, sitting in the rocking chair, giving Michael a bottle. She looked up when I came in, and her expression immediately shifted to concern. "Catherine, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." I walked toward her slowly. My eyes were fixed on Michael, on his tiny face, his closed eyes, his perfect little hands curled around the bottle. My son, my biological son, the child of my body, even though I had never carried him. The baby I had wanted for so long, finally here, finally real. I held out my arms. Margaret hesitated, clearly confused by my behavior, but she handed me the baby. The moment I felt his weight against my chest, something inside me broke open. All the emotions I had been holding back since the funeral, since the revelation, since reading those terrible, wonderful letters, they all came flooding out at once. I started crying, not quiet tears, not dignified weeping, but deep, wrenching sobs that shook my entire body. I held Michael tight against me, probably too tight, and I cried like I had never cried before. Margaret jumped up, alarmed. "Catherine, what's wrong? Should I call someone? Is it the baby? Did something happen at the bank?" I couldn't answer. I could only cry. Michael, disturbed by the commotion, started fussing. His little face scrunched up, preparing for a wail of his own. I forced myself to take a breath, to calm down, to be a mother. "Shh," I whispered, rocking him gently. "Shh, it's okay. Mama's here, Mama's here." The word came out before I could stop it. "Mama," as if I had been saying it all his life, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Michael settled, soothed by the motion and the sound of my voice. He looked up at me with those eyes that I now realized were shaped exactly like mine. That little birthmark on his shoulder, the one that looked like a tiny heart. I had the same birthmark, in the same place. How had I not seen it before? "Catherine." Margaret's voice was gentle but insistent. "Please, tell me what's going on." I looked at her. Richard's sister, a woman I had known for 18 years. A woman who had been kind to me, even when her brother had not. A woman who deserved some kind of explanation, even if I couldn't give her the whole truth. "I'm keeping him," I said. My voice was hoarse from crying, but steady. "I'm going to raise him as my own." Margaret nodded slowly. "All right, but why are you crying? What did you find at the bank?" I looked down at Michael, at my son. "I found out that he belongs with me," I said, "that he's always belonged with me. That's all I can tell you right now. Maybe someday I'll explain more. But for now, just know that this is right. He's supposed to be here with me." Margaret studied my face for a long moment. I could see the questions in her eyes, the confusion, the concern. But she was a kind woman, and she knew when to push and when to step back. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay. If that's what you need, then that's what we'll do." She stayed for another hour, helping me feed Michael, showing me how to burp him properly, giving me tips on swaddling. She had raised 3 children of her own and was a wealth of practical knowledge. When she finally left, I was alone with Michael for the first time since learning the truth about who he really was. I sat in the rocking chair, holding him, watching his face as he drifted off to sleep. He was so peaceful, so unaware of the chaos that surrounded his existence, so innocent of all the lies and deceptions and manipulations that had brought him into the world. "I'm your mother," I whispered to him. "Your real mother. I know you can't understand that yet. I know it doesn't mean anything to you right now, but someday you'll understand. Someday I'll tell you everything. And I hope, when that day comes, you'll forgive me for the way things happened. I hope you'll forgive your father, too." He made terrible choices, but he made them because he wanted you to exist. He wanted to give you to me." Michael slept on, oblivious. I thought about Richard, about the man I had been married to for 18 years, about the stranger I was only now beginning to understand. He had never loved me. He had said so in his letter, and I believed him. The love I thought we had was an illusion, a performance, a convenient arrangement that suited his needs. But he had also done this. He had gone to extraordinary lengths, crossed ethical lines that should never be crossed, spent millions of dollars, and orchestrated an elaborate deception, all to give me a child. Was that love? Not the romantic kind, not the kind I had dreamed of, but something else, something twisted and broken and wrong, but also, in its own way, devoted. I didn't know what to call it. I didn't know how to categorize it. I just knew that it had resulted in Michael, and Michael was here now, and nothing else really mattered. The weeks that followed were the hardest and most beautiful of my life. Every day brought new challenges. Midnight feedings that left me exhausted. Diaper changes that seemed endless. Crying fits that I couldn't always soothe, no matter how hard I tried. I had no experience with babies. I had never been a mother before. Everything was new. Everything was difficult. Everything required me to learn on the fly. But every day also brought new joys. The first time Michael smiled at me, really smiled, not just a reflex, but a genuine expression of happiness. The way he would grab my finger and hold on tight, as if I was the only solid thing in his world. The sound of his breathing when he slept, that soft rhythm that became the soundtrack of my nights. I hired a lawyer to make sure everything was legally secure. Her name was Patricia, the same attorney that someone had recommended to me years ago for estate planning. She was sharp, thorough, and completely unshockable. When I showed her the documents from the safety deposit box, she raised her eyebrows slightly, but said nothing judgmental. She just studied the papers, asked clarifying questions, and laid out my options. "The good news," she said, "is that Melissa signed away her parental rights as part of the surrogacy agreement. The contracts are solid. She has no legal claim to Michael. And the bad news? The bad news is that surrogacy laws are complicated. What your husband did was not exactly legal. Using your eggs without your consent raises serious ethical and legal questions. If anyone wanted to challenge Michael's status, they could potentially create problems." My stomach tightened. "What kind of problems?" Patricia leaned back in her chair. "Worst case scenario? Someone could argue that you're not his legal mother because you never consented to the surrogacy. They could try to have him declared a ward of the state. It's unlikely, but not impossible. How do I prevent that? You adopt him, formally, legally, with all the proper paperwork. It's a bit unusual, given that he's your biological child, but it will create an unbreakable legal bond. No one will be able to challenge your rights as his mother." So that's what I did. The adoption process took 3 months. There were home visits, background checks, interviews, mountains of paperwork. But in the end, it was done. Michael was legally, officially, permanently mine. The day the adoption was finalized, I took him home and held him for hours. I couldn't stop crying. Happy tears this time, tears of relief and gratitude and overwhelming love. "You're my son," I told him over and over. "Nothing can change that now. Nothing can take you away from me. You're mine forever," he gurgled and reached for my face with his tiny hands. He had no idea what was happening, what it meant, why his mother was so emotional. But he seemed happy, and that was enough. During this time, I also had to deal with Richard's estate. He had left behind a complicated financial situation. Multiple accounts, investments, properties, business interests. It took months to sort through it all. Most of it came to me as his widow. The house, the savings, the investment portfolios. His company was sold to his business partner, which brought in a substantial amount. By the time everything was settled, I was wealthy. Much wealthier than I had realized we were. But there was also the trust Richard had set up for Michael. A separate account, legally protected, meant to provide for his education and future. It was significant, more than enough to give him every opportunity in life. I didn't touch it. I added to it instead. Whatever Michael needed, I would provide from my own resources. The trust would be his when he was older, a gift from the father he would never know. Melissa never came back. True to Richard's word, she had taken her money and disappeared. Through Richard's business contacts, I learned that she had moved to Spain, bought a villa somewhere on the coast, started a new life with her blood money. I tried to hate her. I wanted to hate her. She had carried my child in her body for 9 months, and then she had abandoned him without a second thought. She had stood at my husband's funeral and handed me a baby, like he was a package to be delivered. She had lied to my face and walked away, counting her millions. But every time I looked at Michael, I remembered that Melissa had given me something precious. Without her, he wouldn't exist. Without her willingness to be a surrogate, however mercenary her motives, I would never have become a mother. So I made peace with it. Not forgiveness, exactly, but acceptance. Melissa had played her role, taken her payment, and exited the stage. She was gone from our lives, and that was probably for the best. The harder challenge was figuring out how I felt about Richard. I spent hours in therapy talking about him. Dr. Chen was patient, never pushing, always letting me come to my own conclusions. She helped me understand that I could hold multiple truths at the same time, that Richard could be both a villain and a misguided hero, that his actions could be both unforgivable and understandable, that I could hate what he did while also being grateful for the result. "How do you feel about him now?" Dr. Chen asked me one day, about 6 months after the funeral. I thought about it for a long time before answering. "I feel like I'm mourning 2 people," I said. "The husband I thought I had, who never existed, and the real Richard, who I never knew, but am only now beginning to understand." "Which one are you more sad about losing?" "The first one," I admitted. "The illusion. I love that man. I built my life around him. Finding out he wasn't real is like discovering that the ground you've been standing on is actually quicksand." "And the real Richard?" "Him I'm angry at. But also, strangely, I pity him. He was so broken, so incapable of real connection. He spent his whole life manipulating people because he didn't know how to actually be with them. That's not a happy way to live." Dr. Chen nodded. "Do you think you can ever forgive him?" "I don't know. Maybe not forgive, but maybe understand, accept, move on." Moving on was exactly what I was trying to do. I threw myself into motherhood with everything I had. Every milestone Michael reached felt like a victory. His first tooth, his first steps, his first word, which was "Mama," spoken on a random Tuesday afternoon while I was folding laundry. I cried when he said it. Of course I did. But they were happy tears. Tears of joy and wonder and overwhelming love for this little person who had come into my life in the strangest possible way. Margaret stayed close. She visited often, bringing toys and clothes and unsolicited parenting advice. She never asked about what I had found in that safety deposit box. She never pushed for explanations. She just accepted that Michael was part of the family now and treated him like any other nephew. I also reconnected with old friends who had drifted away during my marriage. Richard had been possessive in subtle ways, always finding reasons why we couldn't attend gatherings or meet up with people. Without him, I realized how isolated I had become. Slowly, I rebuilt my social life, play dates with other mothers, coffee with former colleagues, even a few dates, though I wasn't ready for anything serious. It felt good to be Catherine again, not just Richard's wife, to rediscover who I was outside of that marriage. Elizabeth Monroe, the woman who had known Richard as a child, became a regular part of our lives. She was the closest thing Michael had to a grandmother. She would come over and tell stories about Richard and Rebecca, about their childhood, about the people they had been before tragedy broke them apart. Through Elizabeth, I learned more about Richard than I had in 18 years of marriage. I learned about the abuse he had suffered, the responsibility he had felt for his twin sister, the guilt that had consumed him after the accident that killed her. He was never the same after Rebecca died, Elizabeth told me one afternoon. We were sitting on my back porch, watching Michael play in the grass. He was almost 2 now, toddling around with the reckless confidence of a child who doesn't yet know fear. How do you mean? He closed off, built walls around himself so high that no one could get through. He learned to perform emotions rather than feel them. He became very good at saying the right things, doing the right things, appearing like a normal person. But inside, he was hollow. He never let anyone in again. Not even me? Elizabeth shook her head sadly. I don't think he knew how. The part of him that could truly connect with another person died with Rebecca. I watched Michael pick a dandelion and study it with intense concentration. He had Richard's focus, that single-minded attention that could be charming or unsettling, depending on the situation. He loved Rebecca, Elizabeth continued, truly loved her. They were twins, connected in a way that's hard for other people to understand. When she died, he lost his only real relationship. Everything after that was just imitation, including me, including you. But Catherine, here's what I want you to understand. Just because he couldn't love the way normal people love, doesn't mean he didn't care about you in his own way. Michael is proof of that. He went to extraordinary lengths to give you a child. That's not nothing. That's devotion, even if it's twisted, even if it's wrong. I thought about that a lot, about love and devotion and the difference between them, about how someone could be incapable of real emotional connection, but still take actions that look like love. Richard had done a terrible thing. He had violated my autonomy, my trust, my right to make decisions about my own body and my own life. He had used my eggs without consent. He had created a child in secret. He had planned an elaborate deception that would have continued indefinitely if he hadn't died. But he had also given me Michael. And Michael was not a thing, not a possession, not a manipulation. Michael was a person, a beautiful, innocent, wonderful person who laughed when I tickled him and cried when he was tired and was learning new words every single day. Could I separate the gift from the giver? Could I love the child while condemning the method of his creation? I decided that I could. I had to, because the alternative was letting Richard's wrongdoing poison my relationship with my son, and I refused. To do that, Michael was innocent. He deserved a mother who loved him without reservation, and that's what I would be. On Michael's 2nd birthday, I threw a party. Nothing huge, just family and close friends. Margaret and her children, Elizabeth, a few mothers from Michael's play group with their kids, Patricia, my lawyer, who had become something of a friend through all our dealings. There was cake and presents and too many pictures. Michael was overwhelmed by the attention and cried halfway through, which everyone assured me was completely normal for a 2-year-old. After the party, when everyone had gone home and Michael was asleep in his crib, I sat in my living room, surrounded by wrapping paper and deflated balloons. I should have been cleaning up. Instead, I just sat there, thinking. 2 years. It had been 2 years since Richard died. 2 years since Melissa put a baby in my arms and changed my life forever. 2 years of learning how to be a mother, how to be alone, how to be myself. I wasn't the same person I had been at that funeral. That Catherine had been naive, sheltered, dependent on a husband who never truly loved her. This Catherine was stronger, more self-reliant, more aware of the complicated truths that made up real life. I didn't regret any of it. How could I? Every terrible thing that had happened had led me here, to this moment, to this life with my son. Richard had lied to me. He had manipulated me. He had violated my trust in ways that should have been unforgivable. But he had also given me Michael. And Michael was worth everything. All the pain, all the confusion, all the grief. Worth it, for the privilege of being his mother. I got up and went to Michael's room. He was sleeping peacefully, his chest rising and falling in that steady rhythm I knew so well. I stood by his crib for a long time, just watching him breathe. "I'm going to tell you the truth someday," I whispered. "All of it. About your father and what he did. About Melissa and her role. About how you came to be mine in the strangest way possible. I don't know how old you'll be when I tell you. I don't know how you'll react. But I promise you'll know the truth. No more secrets, no more lies. Just the honest, messy, complicated story of how you came into this world." Michael stirred in his sleep, but didn't wake. "And I promise you something else," I continued. "I promise to love you with everything I have, to be the mother you deserve, to give you the childhood your father never had, to raise you to be kind and honest and brave, all the things Richard wanted to be, but couldn't manage." I reached into the crib and adjusted his blanket, touched his soft hair, felt my heart swell with a love so intense it almost hurt. "You're my son," I said. "No matter how you got here, no matter what secrets surrounded your birth, you're mine and I'm yours, forever." Michael slept on, peaceful and safe, dreaming whatever dreams 2-year-olds dream. And I stood there in the darkness watching over him, grateful for this strange and wonderful gift that had come to me wrapped in lies, but was itself the purest truth I had ever known. My son, my beautiful, miraculous son. That's my story, from the funeral to now, from the moment a stranger put a baby in my arms to the moment I realized he had been mine all along, from devastation to healing, from lies to truth, from loneliness to love. It wasn't the life I planned. It wasn't the motherhood I imagined. But it was real, and it was mine, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Richard was wrong about many things, but he was right about one thing. Michael is beautiful. He's the most beautiful thing I've ever had in my life. And every day, I thank whatever forces brought him to me, even if those forces included deception and manipulation, and a deeply flawed man who couldn't love anyone the normal way. Life is strange. People are complicated. Love takes forms we don't expect and can't always understand. But in the end, what matters is this. I'm a mother. Michael is my son. And we're going to be okay. More than okay. We're going to be happy. We already are. Now, I want to hear from you. What do you think about everything that happened in this story? Do you think Richard's intentions made his actions forgivable, or was what he did unforgivable, no matter what reason he had? Would you have kept the baby if you found out the truth? How would you have handled discovering that your husband had used your eggs without your consent? And what about Melissa? Should she have faced consequences for her role in all of this? What would you have done differently if you were Catherine? I really want to know your thoughts, so drop them in the comments below. I read every single comment, and I love hearing different perspectives on these complicated situations. There's no right or wrong answer here, just real human reactions to an impossible situation. If this story touched you in any way, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss the next one.